It's strange how life works. You can spend years surrounded by cameras, bright lights, loud applause, and suddenly one ordinary afternoon can hit you harder than any movie line you've ever delivered. I wasn't expecting anything profound that day. No scripts, no directors, no expectations. Just me walking through a quiet, peaceful afternoon in Carmel, by the sea, a place that always feels like a deep breath for the soul. The air smelled like the ocean, and the late sunlight was stretching across the old stone courtyard of the Mission Basilica. Kids in white dresses and suits were laughing after their first communion class. Families were taking pictures, capturing one of those small but beautiful milestones in life. I smiled to myself, staying out of the way, just passing through. But the universe, it has a way of placing moments in front of you at exactly the right time. I noticed a little girl among the crowd, maybe 7 years old, bright eyes, tiny steps, white dress flowing like she was walking inside her own little miracle. She was holding her grandmother's hand, admiring everything around her. Her grandma saw me first, whispered to her. I didn't hear the words, but I saw the spark immediately appear in the little girl's expression. It was that fearless curiosity only children have before the world teaches them doubt. And before I could even pretend to look busy or blend into the background, she was already running toward me, straight into the moment I'll never forget. She tugged gently on my jacket, so small she barely reached my chest. When I looked down, her eyes locked into mine, not blinking, not intimidated, not judgmental, just honest. "Excuse me," she said softly. "You're Keanu Reeves, right?" I smiled and knelt down so we were face to face. "Yeah," I said, "that's me." Her family froze. People nearby stopped talking. A few phones came out, but nobody said anything. It felt like everyone knew something meaningful was about to happen. Then, with the purest voice and the kind of courage most adults lose along the way, she asked, "Do you believe in God?" Those words, they didn't just float in the air, they landed, heavy and gentle at the same time. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I've answered thousands of questions in my life about movies, stunts, fame, heartbreak, but this one, there's no script for it, no pre-written line, no safe way to dodge it. And she wasn't asking to challenge me or debate my beliefs. She was asking the way a child asks why the sky is blue, because she genuinely, deeply wanted to know. I took a breath and let the silence hold. I could feel the eyes of strangers waiting to see how I'd respond, but in that moment I wasn't talking to a crowd. I was talking to one little girl searching for truth. "You just asked me the most important question anyone could ask," I finally said. "Way more important than anything about Hollywood or movies." Her eyes didn't leave mine. She stood there, ready to hear something real, and I realized she deserved nothing less than honesty. "I believe there's more to this life than what we can see." I told her gently. "More than fame, more than money, more than everything people think is important." I pointed lightly at her heart. "I believe whatever created love, that's where God is." The mission behind us stood tall and silent, like it was listening too. The world felt still, like time paused so a child's question could be properly answered. I looked around at the families laughing, celebrating, holding onto each other, and I continued. "A lot of people use God as a reason to judge or divide, but love, real love, it doesn't divide, it connects." She nodded slowly, like her heart understood what her mind couldn't yet explain. I told her, when I think about Jesus, I don't think about rules or arguments or who's right and who's wrong. I think about kindness. I think about forgiveness. I think about someone who looked at every person, rich, poor, sick, different, and said, "You matter, you belong, you're loved." I could feel a shift in the air, people around us leaning in, absorbing every word as if they too had been waiting for a reminder like this. "See," I said, "I've played a lot of characters who use fists and guns to fix things. But real strength, the kind Jesus talked about, is choosing love when anger would be easier. It's forgiving when holding a grudge would feel better. It's helping someone even when nobody sees it." The little girl's eyebrows raised, like she felt the weight of that truth even if she couldn't fully articulate it. I smiled softly and continued, "Faith isn't a scorecard. It isn't about knowing everything. It's about searching, caring, asking questions like this one." She tilted her head, thinking hard, absorbing every word. "Do you ever talk to him?" she asked, and man, the way she asked. It wasn't childish, it was hopeful. I nodded. "Yeah." I said, "Sometimes when I'm confused, or when life hurts, or even when I'm happy and thankful, I think God listens to all of it." I placed a hand gently over my chest, not out loud, but in here. Her grandmother wiped a tear with the corner of her sleeve. A few others sniffed quietly. The mood wasn't sad, it was like something sacred had been unlocked in all of us. I leaned a little closer and said, "You know the cool thing about faith. It grows every time you choose kindness, every time you help someone, every time you forgive." She smiled that kind of smile that feels like the world just got a tiny bit brighter. "And do you know what I believe most?" I continued, "That God is never far away, especially from kids like you, because your heart still believes in good things. You still see the world through love, not fear." She breathed in suddenly like the words hit her deeper than either of us expected. A tear gathered in her left eye and began rolling down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She let it fall, and that moment. That little tear. It was like watching the exact second a soul understands something true. I smiled, standing back up slowly, and said, "Never stop asking big questions. They lead us somewhere beautiful." She wrapped her arms around me without asking the purest thank you a child can give. Her grandma mouthed the words, "God bless you," and the crowd, everyone who witnessed this unscripted miracle, stood quietly, like they all felt closer to something divine than they did a few minutes earlier. As I walked away, I realized something. That little girl didn't come to me because I'm a famous actor. She came because kids have a gift adults lose. They recognize love where it lives. She didn't ask for proof or doctrine or theology. She asked about God because love led her to the question, and love led me to the answer. Before I could take more than a few steps, I heard small footsteps behind me, quick, determined, like she wasn't finished just yet. I turned, and there she was again, the little girl with ocean-wide curiosity in her eyes. This time, though, she wasn't running toward a movie star. She was running toward someone she trusted to tell her the truth. She stood right in front of me, catching her breath, clutching a tiny silver cross necklace around her neck like it was the most precious thing she owned. "Wait," she said, trying not to sound too loud. "Can I ask one more question?" Her words were innocent, but the weight they carried was anything but. I nodded gently and leaned down again so we were face to face. Her family watched from a distance, giving her the space to speak her heart. The wind was soft, carrying the faint sound of the mission bells echoing through the courtyard. I could tell she wasn't asking because she wanted attention. She was asking because her heart needed clarity. She held the necklace tighter, eyes glistening, voice small but brave. "Why does God let people we love go away?" The world quieted instantly. That question, that universal heartbreak spoken by someone so young, felt like a knife dipped in innocence. I knew that look. I've seen it in real life, in hospital waiting rooms, at funerals, in the quiet moments when grief becomes too heavy to hide, and I've lived it myself. Loss has been a constant shadow in my life. My father leaving when I was 3, the accident that injured my sister, losing people I cared about deeply, the kind of wounds the world can't see, but the soul never forgets. I inhaled slowly, letting the truth find the right shape. "I've wondered that too." I told her, my voice softer now, "more times than I can count." She didn't look away. She was holding on to my every word like they were the only light she had in a confusing moment. "It hurts," I continued, "because love is real. If we didn't love people, losing them wouldn't break us." I took a moment, and in that silence, I remembered all the faces I've said goodbye to. the people who left too soon, the memories that still ache. But I believe this, I said, choosing each word like a fragile piece of glass. When someone leaves this world, the love stays. There was a shift in her expression, like something inside her softened. How? She whispered. I looked her right in the eyes, not as an actor, not as someone the world sees as strong, but as a human being who knows what it's like to miss someone every day. Because love doesn't depend on having a body, I said. It doesn't disappear with time or distance. It lives here. I pointed to her heart in the place where memories never die. She nodded just once, but you could feel her heart listening deeper than her mind. I continued, you know. Sometimes I think God lets us meet the most amazing people only for a little while, because their purpose is to help us grow, to shape us, to make us kinder. Even when they're gone, they leave their fingerprints on our souls. Her tiny fingers loosened around her necklace. Her breathing steadied. Hope was replacing the confusion. I glanced up for a second, watching a bird glide across the golden sky free, effortless, unhurried. When we lose someone, I said, it doesn't mean the story is over. It just means the pages changed. She tilted her head the way only kids do when a new truth begins to settle inside them. Do you think we see them again? She asked. I smiled, not because I had a simple answer, but because her question was wrapped in love, not fear. I'd like to believe that we do, I said, in some better place, where there's no pain and no goodbyes, a place where love continues forever. Her small shoulders relaxed, like a heavy weight she didn't understand was finally lifted. The tear that had fallen earlier had dried, but her eyes were still shining not with sadness now, but with comfort. At that moment her grandmother walked toward us, slow but graceful. She laid a gentle hand on the little girl's shoulder. "Tell Mr. Reeves thank you," she said softly, but the little girl didn't speak instead. She took a step closer and hugged me again. This one felt different longer, warmer like gratitude shaped into a quiet embrace. I held her gently, careful not to break the tenderness of the moment. When she pulled back, she looked up and whispered, "I won't forget." And something about the way she said it told me she meant it with every part of her heart. Her grandmother smiled through tears and thanked me not for being famous, but for making a child feel seen. Under that California sun, the mission stood behind us like a guardian watching over a miracle smaller than a sermon but bigger than a movie premiere. As I finally walked away, I found myself touching my own chest right over my heart. That tiny human full of questions and overflowing with love had given me something too. She reminded me that even the questions that hurt are worth asking, that vulnerability is not weakness, it's a doorway to truth. On the dusty path leading away from the courtyard, I paused for a moment and looked back. She was still watching me, waving with the purest smile I had seen in years. Her grandmother whispered something in her ear, and the girl nodded proudly. I kept walking, but my thoughts stayed behind with her. Maybe angels don't always come with wings. Sometimes they come in white dresses with questions too big for their small voices. Sometimes God sends miracles disguised as children to remind us that faith isn't measured by certainty. It's measured by love. And that day, a little girl reminded me what I often forget, that even when life breaks us, even when people we love disappear into worlds we can't see, love remains the proof that they were here. Love remains the connection that death can't cut. Love remains always. As I kept walking toward the car waiting for me by the street, I felt something shift inside. You know, when you work in film, when your face becomes familiar to the world, people think they know you, the characters you play, the headlines they read. But that little girl didn't see any of that. She didn't see John Wick. She didn't see Neo. She saw a man who might be able to help her understand why her heart hurt, and somehow that meant more than any applause I've ever heard echo from a theater. I reached the sidewalk, paused for a moment near a small iron bench, and sat down just to breathe, not because I needed rest, but because I wanted a second to hold onto that moment before the world sped up again. I watched families leaving the church grounds, some laughing, some wiping tears, all living their own private stories. It reminded me how every person you pass is carrying invisible chapters. That businessman checking his phone, maybe he's terrified about a diagnosis he hasn't told anyone about. That mother hurrying her kids along, maybe she hasn't slept in days trying to hold everything together. That teenager with the headphones, maybe he's searching for a reason to believe tomorrow is worth showing up for. You never know what people are battling. The world teaches us to judge quickly, but life teaches the opposite. It asks us to slow down, to look closer, to care without needing a reason. My driver approached, opening the car door politely. I thanked him, but before getting in, I looked back one more time toward the mission. The sun was setting behind it now, painting the sky with these wild shades of orange and violet, like the heavens wanted to leave one last message before night arrived. I couldn't help thinking, how many times have I walked past someone who needed a moment of kindness and didn't even notice? How often do we forget that being human means being connected? The world moves fast, but hearts need time. We drove for a while silently, the hum of the road creating a kind of reflective rhythm. My mind replayed every word the little girl said. Her pain was still fresh, still learning how to exist, and I knew that pain all too well. Loss isn't something you ever finish grieving. It doesn't close like a door. It becomes part of you like a scar that aches when the weather changes. People sometimes ask me why I talk so much about kindness, why I seem so protective of others' dignity. It's because I've seen what the absence of kindness can do. I've felt what it's like to break quietly while the world keeps spinning. After a few minutes, the driver asked politely, "Everything okay, Mr. Reeves?" I glanced at him, realizing he noticed the faraway look on my face. "Yeah," I said with a small smile, "just thinking about life." He nodded like he understood, and maybe he did. Sometimes that's all we need, someone who listens without needing details. We arrived at my hotel, the kind where everything is polished and perfect, but feels strangely empty. I walked through the lobby with its marble floors shining like mirrors. People were chatting, laughing, checking in, unaware of the quiet conversation that had just changed someone's world, and maybe mine too. I reached my room and slipped off my jacket, setting it carefully on the chair. The silence felt different now, not lonely, but thoughtful. I walked to the window and stared out over the city. Lights flickered on one by one as evening deepened. Far below, cars looked like fireflies chasing destinations. Sometimes the universe whispers lessons to us, but that day, it spoke loudly through a child's voice. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the memories of my own losses rise to the surface. My mother, who gave me the strength to keep going even when life felt unbearable. Friends who once laughed beside me and now live only in stories. Dreams that never got the chance to become real. And yet, somehow, love remained the constant thread holding every memory together. I closed my eyes and saw the girl again, her bravery, her honesty. Funny how kids can articulate what adults bury deep under distractions and responsibilities. They ask the questions we're too afraid to speak aloud. We spend our lives searching for big answers, but sometimes the simplest truth is the one that saves us. We need each other. After a while, I picked up the phone and called downstairs. "Could you send up a paper and pen?" I asked. Minutes later, a gentle knock delivered what I requested. I sat at the small desk by the window and began to write, not a script, not a contract, but a letter. A letter to grief, a letter to love, a letter to anyone who might need to hear what that little girl needed today. I wasn't sure where it would end up or who would read it someday, but I knew the words had a purpose. We do not lose people to death. I wrote, "We lose them to time, but time cannot steal the love they gave us. The moments remain the laughter, the guidance, the warmth of their embrace. Let memory be your proof that love survives." When I finished, I set the pen down and leaned back, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My heart felt lighter, not because the pain disappeared, but because it had a place to rest. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means carrying love forward. I stood again by the window, watching the city slowly surrender to night. Life can be beautiful even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because the pain means the story mattered. If we choose to, we can turn sorrow into understanding, and understanding into compassion, and compassion into the kind of world that little girl deserves to grow up in. As the moon climbed higher, I whispered a quiet promise into the still air. I will not forget today, and I knew she wouldn't either. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains like a gentle reminder that the world always finds a way to continue. I sat up slowly, feeling that familiar mix of exhaustion and clarity. There was a knock on the door, soft, respectful. When I opened it, the hotel manager stood there holding a small envelope. He seemed nervous, like he was afraid he might be intruding on something important. "Mr. Reeves, this was left for you at the front desk," he said quietly. I thanked him and closed the door, curiosity tugging at me. I opened the envelope and found a folded piece of notebook paper, the kind kids tear from school binders. On the front, in big uneven letters, was written, "To the man who saved my heart." Inside, the little girl had drawn 3 figures holding hands, a child in the middle, and 2 tall figures on each side. Over one, she wrote Mommy. Over the other, me. And above the picture, in small, careful handwriting, she wrote, "Thank you for telling me my mommy is still with me. I think she likes the flowers now." I won't forget. There was a tiny heart drawn in the corner, its edges slightly smudged, like maybe she had hesitated before giving it. I stood there holding that letter as a deep ache formed in my chest, the good kind of ache. The kind that reminds you your heart is still alive and capable of feeling everything. I pressed the letter gently to my chest for a moment before placing it inside my jacket with the utmost care, as if it were something fragile and sacred, and in a way it was. That note wasn't just a thank you. It was proof that even the smallest gesture, even a few simple words spoken honestly, can change the direction of someone's life. Later that day, I returned to the mission, not because anyone asked me to, but because I needed to see it again through different eyes. When I arrived, a breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers across the grounds. People placed bouquets and candles at the steps, honoring loved ones they could no longer embrace. I stood among them quietly, respecting each story written in those offerings. The priest noticed me and approached with a gentle smile. His eyes seemed to hold a lifetime of understanding. "You made quite an impact here yesterday," he said softly. "That little girl hasn't stopped smiling since." I swallowed hard, humbled by the thought. "She did more for me than I did for her." I replied, and it was the truth, because she reminded me why we're all still trying, why hope survives even in the darkest corners of our hearts. Not long after, as I prepared to leave, the priest spoke again. "You know," he said, "people think miracles are grand events, but most often, they're quiet moments where one heart allows another to breathe again. That's what you gave her." I nodded, unsure what to say to something so pure. Sometimes silence speaks louder than gratitude. As I walked back through the city, I noticed things differently every interaction, every gesture, every tired face carrying invisible weight. A man holding a sign asking for help. A woman rushing past with tears she tried to hide. A teenager sitting alone on a bench, staring into a world he felt disconnected from. I stopped, sat beside him without saying a word at first. He glanced at me cautiously, unsure. After a moment, I said, "You okay?" Not in a pushy way, just a human way. He hesitated, then shook his head, his voice breaking as he whispered, "No, not really." And just like that, a conversation began, a chance to remind another person that their story mattered. You see, in life, we pass thousands of people we'll never meet, but sometimes the universe chooses one person for us to truly see. And when we do, when we take a moment to care, something shifts. For them, for us, for the world, eventually night returned, painting the sky with that deep shade of blue that always makes me feel both small and infinite. I found myself walking to a quiet overlook where the city lights shimmered like stars that had fallen to earth. I leaned against the railing and let the wind carry away every loud thought until only the essential ones remained. We are not measured by the roles we play in movies, or the awards on a shelf, or the headlines that distort us. We are measured by the way we show up for each other, especially when there's nothing to gain. Kindness is not a currency. Compassion is not a transaction. Love doesn't follow logic or schedule or convenience. It appears exactly where it's needed most in moments we don't see coming. The memory of that little girl's hug returned, warm and real, the way she believed me, the trust in her voice when she asked if her mother was still near. And I thought, if one child can carry so much hope despite heartbreak, then maybe the rest of us can, too. So I pulled out her letter once more and read it beneath the moonlight. Her little handwriting reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. Love doesn't end when breath does. Love continues in every smile, every shared story, every brave step forward. It becomes the invisible force that pushes us to keep going. I whispered into the night, not really expecting anything back, to everyone who has lost someone. They are with you, not behind, not gone with you. And the wind, gentle and knowing, carried the message into the dark like a promise sealed in the stars. Before heading back, I took one last look at the city alive beneath me. Maybe we can't fix the world overnight. Maybe we can't heal every wound or erase every pain, but we can do something. We can care. We can listen. We can hold space for someone who needs it. And sometimes that is enough to keep the light from going out. I slipped the note into my jacket, close to my heart, because some reminders deserve to stay with us forever. And as I walked away, I felt it, that quiet understanding. Sometimes the most heroic thing we can do is simply be kind.